Welcome to the Rabia and Sana show. We're two Desi girls reinventing cultural norms with love to make difficult conversations easier to help you take courageous steps faster.
Whether you feel like a misfit now or have been breaking the standards, this podcast is for you, for the adults, the young. Come as you be and become your authentic self as you desire. Let's go reinvent some cultural norms together.
Hello everyone, I am Rabia Paracha. I have been a rebel without a cause for most of my life until I discovered my purpose to empower women to empower themselves. And that led me down a rabbit hole to become a life coach from CTI Coactive Coaching. And today I'm a mind and life power coach who helps people break free of their limiting cultural beliefs to find the life they love and the love of their life.
Hello everyone, I am Sana. I am from New Jersey, a Pakistani American. Professionally, I work in the clinical research field. And personally, I have always had this purpose of empowering women of South Asian culture to be able to live the life that they want to live and be true to themselves instead of what the culture expects them to be. And so here I am pursuing that purpose, and I am also studying to become a life coach. Let's get started.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode number 4. Our topic today is breaking free in spite of our challenges.
I can't wait for this, Rabia. I think this is going to be a great learning experience for me too as we talk about this today.
This is such an important topic to cover because taking that first step and knowing what the challenges are and then being able to become responsible for them and then actually put plans into motion. And I'm so glad we're discussing this because it wasn't easy for me and I know it wasn't for you as well. And so hopefully what we would like to achieve here is give people some insight, some ideas, some thoughts of using proven techniques and proven executable actions.
Yeah. And when we talk about some of the challenges that you and I faced, I think it's going to help them to pinpoint the challenges that everyone is facing in their lives too and really identify them.
For sure. So tell me, Sana, what was one of your challenges?
I would say that the biggest challenge for me was the family aspect of it and the community and I guess understanding coming from everyone around me, like the society, and facing the pressure from the people, the judgments and what will they say, what will people say, what will people think, and most importantly, my family will think that I'm wrong and my family will, I think even permission, like it got to that point too that I felt like I needed their permission, not just their understanding, but their permission as well to make the changes, or getting that pushback from them that I hurt them, that my action caused them to be hurt, like I am putting them through this. That was really, really the biggest challenge, I would say, in all of it for me.
Right. And having that guilt that if I do this, then they will be hurt.
Yeah.
And then choosing, okay, let me just hurt myself and not do this and suffer for the rest of my life. And I think that's such an important point to really talk about, that guilt and that feeling of being a burden as well, right? Because when you don't have a place to go and who do you go for support? And here you left your home as one. I know this is my story as well. I left my parents' home when I got married as one, and now I've got 2 kids.
Yeah.
So you think twice about going back, and that definitely is a big challenge because taking that first step for me took 10 years because I just didn't know how to do it, and feeling that guilt that how can I be a burden on my family?
Yeah, I mean, that word guilt didn't come to me until now. I didn't know, but it was just feeling it, but not knowing that it's called guilt. But it's an excruciating feeling, like knowing that, oh my God, because of me, my family is going through this because of me. And yeah, it's called guilt. That's what it's called.
This is so important. We've talked in our first episode about the underlying cultural themes of the folkways, mores, and taboos.
Yeah.
But this comes down to folkways and mores where we feel that we have to oblige to what has been told to us, that when we get married, that's where we're going to stay. And so we question ourselves for not fitting in to what's expected.
And also that what I want is not important enough, or my my choice is not important enough because their hurt is more important than what I want.
Right. And it's that respecting the elders and parents, back to, what we discussed. And for those of you who haven't caught that episode, please do check it out because it gives you a good undertone of where these things that we're talking about today are stemming from, are rooted in. And it's important because it diminishes our self-worth, our self-identity. Who am I? Why don't I matter? All these things come up. And am I just supposed to roll over and play dead for the rest of my life?
I think that's what the realization for me was when I overcame it, was that, yes, my choice, my self-worth is important, or that I am important. That, yes, it will cause hurt and pain to my family and to the community, but I am more important than that,
Right. And I think the other thing is, in this conversation about recognizing the challenges, that we have to separate ourselves from this is me, this is them. We're not one.
Yeah.
I always say to everyone I know that I can't promise you that I won't hurt you, but I can promise it won't be on purpose. I think sometimes when we take these decisions, it's taken very personally.
Yeah.
And it's challenging to make someone understand that this isn't directed to them, this is for me, that there is this separation between them and us. And this is not to say that I don't respect you, that I don't care, but I matter too, and I care for myself as well. And
Yes.
because of that, I want to take this step. And communication, right? We've got to learn how do we say this and be understood, because what I heard from you as well is that you are seeking validation and permission, that it's okay, you do matter. We want you to be happy.
Yeah. And that seeking that permission and validation was not necessary. Like, it was not, I didn't need that in order to do my change. And I didn't need that in order to overcome this feeling of guilt. Like, what they feel is what they feel. And yes, my actions may have caused them to get hurt, but because they're getting hurt doesn't mean that I don't need to do this. But I think our culture makes us feel so guilty, like they don't let go. They elaborate that feeling so much on us. It's so like, the blame and all of that, it happens.
For sure. And you know why?
Why?
Any idea why? I think is because we're so used to living a certain way, these traditions that have been carried on for generations. No
Yeah.
one rocks the boat. And if they do, they're the misfit and the outcasted.
Yeah.
And so change isn't always easy, especially when it's the first time. Like, for the person that's starting that conversation is always really bad, because everyone's been living in a perfect world, even though it's not perfect. It's this perfect theory that this is the perfect world. And what you just said earlier before we started the show, that the understanding is that marriage, because we're talking about marriage here, and leaving that marriage is not going to be a happy place for you, that you will have to suffer, that you will have to put up with a lot. And it's always the wife that has to endure.
Yeah.
And I think that word is tolerate and endure. And these two words, I believe, so harmful for anyone, be it the husband or wife, because for every scenario that we have, 1 out of 10 women might be going through this, and 1 out of 5 men might be going through this. The numbers may not be equal, but it occurs for both. And so why are we so uncomfortable with change? And why can't we own that? Yeah, so of course it's challenging for the person to leave, but why can't we be honest about, hey, she doesn't have support. She's going to work every day. She's coming home and doing the work at home as well. She's raising her children almost single-handedly. And what does she need the husband for?
Yeah.
If he's sitting on the sofa watching TV all day, and she's cooking, she's cleaning, she's taking care of the children, how is this fair?
Yeah. Just because there's no big giant thing staring at you, like physical abuse, or he doesn't make money, or something really big like that, it's not sufficient enough or justifiable enough to do the change. Yeah.
Right. But the challenge is also, when we talk about these things, we're justifying them. And what we're justifying is about emotional manipulation. It's so common that people say, oh, don't worry about that. That happens to all of us.
Yeah.
Justifying it.
Yeah.
making it acceptable and not realizing the impact it had on them and the impact it would have on their daughter or their son.
Yeah, and that justification right there, saying it's okay, it happens all the time, it actually is emotional manipulation, because it makes us think that, okay, maybe I'm wrong because it happens all the time, right? So it's okay that it happens all the time. So then it makes you feel guilty, and it's like such a circle,
Yeah.
of emotional manipulation.
Perpetuating.
Yeah.
You think about it, you think that this is wrong, that there should be a better way, that something needs to be done. You try to have a conversation, and even having the conversation with your spouse or your partner, to have that conversation, you're confronted with this type of, no, there's something wrong with you. You're making this up, or this didn't happen this way. So then you have that challenge of having that communication within the relationship, and then you don't have the support.
Yeah.
There's no one talking about it. And so how do you know you can do this alone? And then you take it to your parents and they're like, oh, what are you worried about? What are you complaining about?
They're doing the same thing that your husband did, right? They're doing the same thing. It's still emotional manipulation. And since our episode with Mahnur, I've been thinking about it, that it wasn't just my ex only who was doing this. It was everyone. It was my family, my parents, my siblings. It's everyone around us makes us feel.
Yeah, so there's this one phrase that I love: when you know better, you do better. And we didn't know. Ignorance is bliss, right? When you don't know something, you can continue doing it. But the second you have the awareness, and it's for the person going through it. So we're talking about the challenges that we face when we need to break free of these cultural norms, how to cut these ties, how to cut the cords of the old way of doing things, and then being able to fly in spite of those challenges, like learning to be free in spite of those challenges. So the challenges is multifold. It's the challenge of actually owning it, taking responsibility, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then it's about, how do I do this? How do I take that first step? Where do I find the courage?
Yeah.
How do I communicate it?
Yeah.
Talk about the challenges and the layers of challenges. How do I communicate it? How do I make people understand that I am not doing this to them? I am for me. And you were saying about not needing support and not needing permission and validation. It's so support, validation, and permission isn't a need, but it's great to have.
It is really hard. It makes it easier.
Yeah. And I can honestly say that I had that. So when I left my husband, it was hard. It took me 10 years, but my mother was there for me. And 10 years, I was fighting with myself. And I didn't know how to break free, how to have both, make myself happy and make my family happy. And ultimately, I think that's the challenge. We also want to please our family. It's important to us, but at what cost, right? So 10 years I suffered. And then when I did leave, we went to my relative's home, my grandmother's home. As we were there, I said, but he doesn't love me. Because growing up in the West, the idea of marriage is very different than growing up in the East.
Yeah.
And so and also the influence of the Bollywood gives us this idea of what love is, and it's definitely not what we have. That's what we know. And so when I went there and we were having this conversation, it was just the four of us. So my grandmother, my mother, myself, and my uncle, my mom. And I said, but he doesn't love me. And he said, what do you mean love? Right? Because love isn't a part of the equation of marriage in an arranged marriage, in our traditional South Asian marriage. So that was one. And how I received support from my mother is something that I'm doing today. She said, I want to empower women.
You saw that?
My mother's words. I can never forget that day. I want to empower women. And fast forward 20 years, like that was for me the seed that was planted that brought me to 2012 when I started the Goddess Group to empower women to empower themselves. So it's interesting what we say and what we hear and what we remember. I can never forget those words. I don't know if my mother will remember it, but I have that clear vision of how we were even seated in that room.
Wow, it meant a lot.
And it meant so much to know that I had the support. I don't believe that they agreed with what I was doing,
Okay.
but they still supported.
That's really awesome. So how did that make you feel when you finally spoke up and you got support, right? Did, like you were waiting all these 10 years and when you actually did it?
Support was there. Support was always there. Unfortunately, I didn't have the vocabulary to
Okay.
actually pinpoint the problems because we're going back to 1997. I
Okay.
was 29 years old.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the vocabulary to pinpoint narcissism. I didn't have the vocabulary to pinpoint that I was hurt from being engaged at a certain age or losing my father or now being halfway across the world and not being able to be close to my father before he passes. I didn't know how to express that. I felt that if I say this, it would hurt them too. It would make them feel worse than they already feel. So I didn't want to talk about these things because, like you were saying, that there's this dilemma. If you say it, they feel bad enough. They know it's not something that, they don't like it anyway. So they're hurt already. Now you're like putting salt on the wounds and saying, look what you did. This is because of you. Right? And I was that person for a while. I was angry, bitter, and resentful. And I acted out on it. But at the same time, these were my challenges when I was in the thick of things.
Yeah, I see it.
And I didn't love myself. I didn't like myself. I didn't know this in terms of vocabulary. I didn't know that this is a matter of self-esteem and self-worth and emotional, mental health.
Yeah.
I didn't have words to promote therapy or healing.
Yeah.
And so I acted out with behaviors that were very normal.
Yeah, I get it. For me, I knew it was a problem, but I knew that I was not going to get it. And when I actually did speak up, I didn't get the support, exactly what I had predicted. It still said that this is my decision because I'm worth it and I need to do this for myself. But again, it had gotten to a point where it was really, 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 really bad. And it shouldn't have gotten to that point, right? We should realize that way sooner. Like it doesn't have to be that bad in order to make changes.
Right. And so times have changed. Times have changed because what you're talking about is 15 years later. The awareness today is far different than the awareness that was. The medical profession, even culture and society are addressing these issues of mental health, of toxic behaviors, emotional manipulation. And so we know these terms and we know that this is there. But now the challenge is, are we moving forward and addressing the issues and taking the appropriate action? Or are we telling our family members, our daughters, our children to suck it up because that's what I did?
Yeah.
Are we a part of the solution or are we a part of the problem?
Yeah. Most of us, even though times have changed, I would say most of us are still part of the problem. And that's what we're doing here, is trying to make people aware that there is a solution.
For sure, because there are belief system barriers. We don't even know that they're there. The beliefs are a problem. And so this is a perfect segue of talking about beliefs into taking responsibility. So how do we take responsibility, knowing all of this, knowing that there are challenges, knowing that it comes back to me and I'm not feeling good about this. Things aren't working in my marriage or in my household, with my family members, with my siblings, or with my parents. They're not working. How can I take responsibility?
Yeah.
So that's the big question.
I think then for me too, it had to come down to being strong and courage, having that courage to speak up, to talk, to say, and to really look inside and to see that, do I want this? Do I have the courage enough to make a change? Am I important enough? The choice is there. Do I have the courage to take that choice? Because it's not just, it's going against the culture, going against your family and hurting them and making them make us feel guilty. So walking us way through the guilt, but it's also an unknown that we're going into, right? Any type of change that we're doing is something new. It's so hard. It's unfamiliar territory. And just that by itself, it's so hard on its own. And then the whole culture piece of it comes along, the family piece of it on top of all of that. So I can only think of the word courage.
Definitely courage is a huge component of taking responsibility. And courage is needed to take action, to communicate, to take that first step, to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Courage is a decision. It's the decision to have two choices and say, I want the choice where I'm included, not the choice that I'm dismissed.
Yeah.
But taking a step back before finding the courage, I would like to go back to the beliefs, because where am I believing a truth that's not true? Where am I a part of the problem? If I am seeing someone else go through this, where am I coming into this situation? How am I perceiving it? Am I saying, oh my goodness, she should stay with her husband because he makes so much money, he provides her with such a good life, and so, or she provides him with such a good life, because today in the Western world, that's happening too. And how am I reacting and responding to other people's situations that are going through what I'm going through? Am I encouraging separation because it's actually healthier for both people? Or am I saying, oh, the decision should be yours?
Yeah.
Suffer.
Yeah. And yeah, you're right, because the change that we want to do, like divorce in my case, is we ourselves are not believing in it because the belief in our head. So we're ashamed of the divorce itself too, because of the belief. Yeah, you're right. Like we blame ourselves.
We believe it to be true.
Yeah, we believe it to be true, and we blame ourselves, and we think that, yeah, we shouldn't get a divorce. It's wrong. It's wrong. You know, like how I was saying in the beginning, I couldn't say the word divorce. I used to call it the D word because I myself didn't believe in it being a thing that was possible, a thing that was normal to do.
Right. And so taking responsibility first is looking at the stigmas that have been associated with certain decisions. Divorce has been stigmatized.
Yeah.
And so that stigma is now constantly coming up for us because it's rooted in shame. It's so shameful that you're taking a divorce. You are a woman who is going to marry you again. You're going to be tainted goods and no one's going to want you.
Yeah. Or that maybe I am.
Objectification, because we are being objectified here, that we are a commodity that is for men to choose.
Yeah. Or maybe I am a bad mother because I am not sacrificing. I'm choosing myself.
Right. If you remember, we had this conversation about dysfunctional relationships in our first episode. I think it was the first or second.
Yeah.
It was the first. And so we were talking about dysfunctional families. So we accept, like taking responsibility for not accepting that divorce is bad, because divorce is just labeled bad by the culture.
Yeah.
Whereas on the religion side, it's very much allowed.
How do we recognize that these things are deeply rooted beliefs rather than the actual truth? Even though I did the things I did get the divorce, I did all of that, it still took me so long to really understand that this is not the actual truth. This is not my real belief. This is the belief that's deeply rooted in me.
The way to assess that is rationally. Am I making up the abuse? Am I making up the control? Am I making up these things, or are they actually facts? So separating facts from feelings is important. How do I feel when someone does this? Am I taking it personally? What am I taking personally? Like we talked about in the challenges, that our families take things personally when we're doing things that are not conforming to their ideas of marriage, or divorce is not conforming to the idea of marriage. So labeled and labeling what you're feeling, and then also saying, did this happen? Even if it's normal, because misogyny was normal. The Me Too movement, it's gotten its backlash as well, but there is a problem. Now, abusing in the solution form is also not right. Making up things is also not right, just to get out and break free.
Yeah.
And so I always talk about, you've heard me say this so many times, and I'll be a broken record. There are three separate things happening. The journey that we have with ourselves, what we feel on the inside when something happens to us as a result of our relationships, as a result of an interaction with our family members, our spouses, our children. So what am I feeling and what happened? Fact, what happened? My experience is different than the fact. It feels much worse because of those emotions. But separating these things, because my journey, when something happens, first thing to do is let me see my inner world. What's going on in my inner world? Because the inner and outer worlds are connected. What's happening in my life is connected to what's going on the inside. But am I now at the mercy of that? Am I being ruled by what's happening, or am I being ruled by what I know? And I know that this is abuse. I know that this isn't healthy for me. I know that I have to make a change. Now, I think that's the first step, kind of taking responsibility of saying, what's my first step? And as someone who didn't know what to do, I could have made better decisions and taken better steps. And one
Yeah.
of them was that go inwards and assess yourself. Go inwards and assess yourself. You don't need a doctor or a therapist to tell you this. You can simply take a step back and say, okay, what's going on inside me? Let me understand
Yeah.
myself before I take that first step. We fail to take that first step inwards because we're constantly living as victims of our lives.
Yeah.
My husband did this to me. My family did this. My children are doing this. My friends are doing this to me. So we're constantly victims, and taking responsibility means that we see that those things are happening. Doesn't make it go away, doesn't make it untrue, but responsibility means that where are my boundaries? How am I giving them permission of crossing that boundary and taking advantage of me, or taking something from me that I don't want to give? Where is my no?
Yeah.
So just having that awareness is important.
I was just going to say being honest, because we don't do that. We're not honest with ourselves. We keep on justifying it over and over again, that the problem isn't there. It's just me. It'll get better. And maybe this is toxic positivity, but really brutally being honest with yourself. But when you're saying that about the responsibility of realizing it, I think we kind of ignore it too.
Yes. And see, we actually like being the victim.
Yeah.
Because it gave me the excuse to complain all the time. And I have a rule. I don't like complainers. I used to be the biggest one. Complain to me once and take an action. Complain to me twice, take an action. But you complain to me 3 times, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Because complaining is a habit. Comparison is a habit. Criticism is a habit. And taking responsibility means first having that awareness, and second, taking responsibility for your consciousness. Being responsible for your consciousness, for your thoughts, and for that awareness is it's a positive step forward in a problem that needs many steps.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I understand. I think that I've heard so many people, say the same thing over and over again. It's a problem, like the complaining and not being able to do anything different. Then that comes down to the responsibility that we're not owning up to it. And how do you take that responsibility? Because they don't even, it's that self-realization, that self-talk, and that brutally honesty with yourself that I have to take the responsibility. The choice is mine. And I think the people who we just complain, they don't know. I feel like they don't know that they have that responsibility.
Yeah. So I can only speak for me, and you can speak for you. And we didn't want to take responsibility because taking responsibility requires courage. And like that brutal honesty it requires courage. It means that we can say that what someone did was wrong. Like, it's easy to complain and say someone was wrong, but actually, because you're just repeating it, and you're indulging in the problem.
Yeah.
Back to what I heard from you earlier today, you're going to be like this and you'll be rewarded in the afterlife.
I know, but that's our culture problem.
Yes.
The things that our culture says to us makes it harder to do these things.
Yes. So taking responsibility and saying, hello, I'm allowed to live a peaceful, happy life here.
Yeah.
I believe that happiness and living peacefully is a God-given human right.
Yeah.
And the culture may disagree, or the examples before us may not validate that to be true.
Yeah.
And so taking responsibility, of making a decision that I'm worthy. Number 2, having that awareness. Let me look at myself before I start pointing fingers at the others. I have this expression of Swiss cheese, and I felt like I was Swiss cheese and there were holes in me.
Okay.
And as I went inwards, the holes sealed.
Oh.
Because the gaps that I didn't understand were actually within. They weren't outside of me.
Yeah.
The validation and the approval, the permission that I was looking for,
Yeah.
giving myself permission from taking responsibility of my life and saying, I am not buying into that crap. Pardon my French. I'm not buying into that. That is not true for me. It
Yeah.
might be true for someone else, but it's not true for me. I am deserving of a peaceful life. I am deserving to be happy. I am worth it. And yes, I'll get backlash. And, 20 years ago, I didn't do things perfectly.
Yeah.
But I know better. And when I know better, I do better. And my whole life is dedicated to helping people do things better than I did so that they don't have to make my mistakes, brand new set of mistakes, but don't make the ones that we know have certain results.
Yeah.
We can build on each other's learnings rather than continuously recreate the failing.
Exactly. I think that's really amazing. Yeah, like if I was to know that all of these things, it would make my journey so much easier, but it was so difficult. It was so difficult because I knew I had to do it because it was just really, really bad situation, but not knowing these things, the culture had made it so hard. And I was a part of it. Like you're saying, I was a part of that problem because I believe it. I believed all of it to be.
Just having that stigma and the shame that, oh my God, I'm going to be a divorcee, and the shame that I'm going to have to carry, it's a construct of society.
Yeah.
And it's to suppress people from breaking free and making things be seen as they are, not as how we want them to be known.
So much shame and guilt. I would say those were the two biggest things.
And I think the stigma as well. The stigma is so important. That creates the shame, that perpetuates the guilt. So stigma, shame, and guilt are brothers and sisters that are constantly playing a role in how we see things and how we're going to deal with our challenges and how much responsibility we're going to take for ourselves, our lives.
Yeah.
And not being caught up in the dysfunction of what's acceptable and what's healthy.
Yeah. But when I think about the physical world, there's so many other consequences and challenges that we have to do after that, right? Like raising your kids alone, the financial aspect of it, the physical aspect of it too. How will we, work and manage the kids and things like that. But the first step of the belief systems and the guilt and the shame, the feelings, the emotions, getting all of that over is the first step. And the rest of the challenges are still there too. Those are different consequences that I think are also worth thinking, and people have to,
Again, a perfect segue into how do we take the action, right? So now that we know some of the challenges that we've discussed today, and then we've taken responsibility for it, now what?
Yeah.
What do we want to do next?
Yeah.
What's the course of action? What should I do first?
Yeah.
Already talked about taking responsibility, but then it's about that second piece of the relationships. How do I make a change?
Yeah. And I think that the plans kind of sort of came easier for me after I realized that I am alone in my whole emotional problem, dealing with the emotions of guilt, shame, and all of that. And then those consequences of, being a single mother and all of those type of things. At the end of the day, the culture is not there in my house from day to day. The family is not there. I'm the one still dealing with all of these things on my own. So that's when the plan and the action, or creating the plan for the actions, sort of came to me. And I made it by realizing that it's all me. I have to do this alone. There's going to be no one else. There's no knight in shining armor coming to save me, or even a family or a godmother or anyone like that. It's all has to come from me. So I have to make the plan. Family's not there. Culture is not there.
It happened much later for me because there wasn't enough awareness or resources. We didn't have internet back then. It was very expensive. So I didn't have all the resources. But when I did have the awareness, I didn't utilize it immediately. But when I did decide to take action, I found that there was support, but not just from the people that I wanted the support from. There were other people, I just didn't know them. There were people who had done this before me. I just didn't know who they were and where they were, which is another reason why you and I are so committed to doing this.
Yeah.
And so when I took that first decision of saying no to cultural norms, right? No to what has been ingrained in me or that I've been conditioned to believe. When I took a step back is when I could see everything clearly. My first decision was to make myself better, right? So taking responsibility is one thing, then to put it into action So I
Yeah.
started going to local meetings, making your life better and improving your life, meaningful living, because I thought that what was missing in my life was meaning and understanding. And I was going through midlife crisis, and we all go through midlife crisis at some.
Yeah.
This was my second midlife crisis.
Mhm.
The first wasn't so much in midlife, but this was my
Mhm.
midlife crisis at, I
Mhm.
think I was in my mid 40s, making that decision to improve my life. And then taking actions, going to meetings, educating myself, finding books and tools, and making a decision. Who was that writer that says not giving a F? There is a book, Stop Giving a Care About What Other People Say.
Oh, yeah. I think I know which ones you're talking about. Yeah.
We'll put the link to the resources on our
Yeah.
website.
You're saying that you took the responsibility of going out and finding that support. So you found the support in the meetings, you're saying the books that you read. And I mean, I've sort of done my things too. I went out to look for that support too, because like you said, support it's not needed, but it's good to have. And it makes it so much easier. You're like, yeah, support is so important for everyone.
See, there are two parts. What you are going to do is your courage. To do
Yeah,
something alone is hard.
so much.
To have support, it's easier. It's not, it doesn't make it easy, it's just easier. It's to know that you're not alone is so important. And that's why group therapy works. Group workouts work. It
Mhm.
keeps you motivated and on track. And the likelihood of you falling back to your default, which happens, we fall back to our default. This is hard. I can't do it alone. It's too much work. A
Yeah.
lot of people go back and they make the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah, then we're stuck in that same cycle over and over again.
And yeah, and that loop cycle, it happens a lot
Oh, yeah.
because of the invisible underlying belief systems that are operating for us without us knowing that they're there.
Yeah. And like we said in our intro, this whole podcast purpose is to make it easier for people to take the courageous steps to make it
Faster.
easier to do,
Yeah.
make them faster. Yeah. But also what support does is also makes you understand these type of things, right? That's what support did to me, because I did the things I needed to do, but I was still feeling guilty and shame and all of that and not understanding. So the support really opened up these, helped me to really explore the feelings, help to become self-aware, and help to realize that, separate the beliefs from what I believe to be true. And so support is not just to make it easier, but also, I think, understanding the whole mental health and to understanding yourself, your self-worth, and all of that comes along with it.
Right. Good point. So when we're taking these actions to transition from one scenario to another, essentially changing our stories of being a victim and then being in control of our lives, taking control of what you have control over, sitting in the driving seat of your own life,
Yeah.
rather than being in the passenger seat and waiting for all the circumstances to get perfect before you take decisions, which is a lot of us wait for those perfect situations. There is no perfect situation. So
Yeah.
sitting in the driver's seat of your own life, taking that action and saying that now I feel so much more in control of my life and I take action.
Isn't that self-growth? That's like development.
Part one is development. Growth is always happening.
Yeah.
But in which direction? What are we growing? Perpetuating the problem and growing the problem? Or are we moving forward and creating solutions? Growth is always happening.
Yeah, I guess it's the other side works too for growth. Yeah.
Everything works on both sides.
Yeah.
Am I doing this to serve me? Or am I doing this to serve my community, my family, my culture?
Yeah.
So I am my culture, but it's not going to be the reason why I do things. I must also have this part that says I should be healthy in my life. And if I'm healthy, if I'm fulfilled, if I'm doing things that I feel like I'm a part of my life equation, then I'm happy, even with less, even without the support.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm not alone. And I know that there's someone who's rooting for me, who's going to pat me on the back every time I do something that might be against the culture, but great for humanity and people and me, because I'm a part of that humanity, I'm part of that people, and it's important to me. So having that distinction, and then our relationships, the other step that we could take is making that decision. But like I said, taking responsibility of our consciousness. What does that look like, right? What thoughts are we thinking?
Yeah.
And for me, I hired a life coach. I found that I didn't want time to be my teacher because it takes a long time.
Yeah.
And then finding that coach, what I achieved in 3 months, I can honestly say I wouldn't have achieved in 3 years.
Wow.
Started a nonprofit, started up some businesses, started having a voice of expressing myself. And I think ultimately this is all about self-expression.
Yeah.
And being able to express without causing more damage. Because often that's what happens, that when we express, we fight, we accuse, we play the victim, we make other people to be responsible for everything, and we don't take ownership.
Yeah, self-expression. That's interesting. Ultimately, it's about that. But the challenges that we face to do that and the lack of responsibility, the lack of knowing, all of that really comes down to, you're right, just being able to express ourselves. There's so much stigma. The culture makes it hard. I mean, I look at some of the other cultures and I compare how people have the same issues that, we face. But maybe some of their challenges are similar to ours, but our culture just makes it 10 times harder to go through them.
You're right, because cultural values are very different, right? And if we're, like we talked about in our first episode, where the Western culture is more questioning and independence, whereas our culture is more collectivism and interdependence, where we rely on each other. So it's in our system. And the confusion begins where we're in both the system. Maybe ultimately the best is to join the two and say all things are important and there is a way to do things properly. And our South Asian culture, I would say, is 30 to 40, if not more years behind, because we're not as open-minded.
Yeah.
Right.
I think this big thing in our culture of sucking it up and sacrifice, and that you'll get it later on. And, you're like, when you die, you're going to get your reward. That's the answer to a lot of it.
And so what other executable, actionable steps did you take and our viewers could potentially think about as well?
I think it's all from situation to situation is different too. But I think that, for me, it was coming down to, getting the family to understand and validate, but they didn't, and I think the action that what I did was just realizing that my worth is more important and getting the relationships that mattered the most were my kids and making sure that they understand, right? So I guess prioritizing your relationships too and realizing which ones are important and working on those relationships was a good action plan for me. And now I'm working on my family relationships as well, knowing that I'm the one who has to make the decisions. The decision has to come from me. That was my action plan, and not allowing others to tell me what to do, and, having that boundaries from those relationships.
And very good, because what you're saying is that once you made the decision, the strategy was to prioritize what's most important to you. And then you're also saying that communicate, right? Let me find the words to communicate as much as possible, but not to seek validation, but to take a step towards change.
Yes.
Knowing that validation isn't going to come easy. If I really want this and I'm going to seek it, eventually, and I do believe this happens, eventually people start seeing the reason behind why you did things, when they start seeing you happy, when they receive the validation. See, you're looking for validation, but the validation they need is through action and through seeing it, because they know us in a certain way as well. So that action of communicating, of deciding, and of doing, showing up by learning and then making the changes.
Yeah.
Saying no, making those boundary changes, and then also taking responsibility of your consciousness by learning how not to think negatively. Now, I want to say this again, learning how not to think negatively does not make you a positive thinker. We don't have to be positive. We have to be neutral in our thinking, so we're not constantly reacting or sugarcoating everything.
Yeah.
Because extremes are harmful. So it's learning how to navigate the negative and bringing yourself back to neutral, not going high with the positive, not going low with the negative. Staying in the middle is so important, because we get high, we get lost, we fly. We go down, we get sad, we deplete, we just lose ourselves as well.
Yeah.
So both scenarios aren't accurate. So when we stop thinking negative, we're actually thinking neutral. And when we think positive, too positive, we can be toxic positivity.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm still learning that. And you're right. When we think so positive, we make the negative things turn into positive, because we constantly keep on thinking the positive of it. Like, it's going to get better. It's okay. It's not that bad. I have a house. I have food. I have shelter. That's the extra positivity thinking. It makes you ignore the negative. And I was doing that all the time, and I still do it because I'm so positive.
Yeah, it's good to be positive. It's good to believe that there will be a good outcome. Optimism and positivity are not the same. Doing things knowing that there will be a positive result is important.
We have to do a whole talk on that difference between optimism and positivity.
Yes, and there is a difference. And so optimism can be found in gratitude, can be found in faith, can be found in self-belief. That I know that I've learned this. I know 10 people before me did this. I know this has a positive outcome. It has a result that I want. It will serve me. Sometimes rather than positive and negative, I like to use healthy. It will serve me. It is best for everyone.
Yeah.
And so when we put it into these terms, we don't sugarcoat the negative. We don't reframe and constantly make it a positive without recognizing the harmful effects it has on me. There's always a piece that's missing that we instantly reframe to make it positive because we can't stand being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And addressing negativity is being uncomfortable. And the only way to find change is through discomfort.
Yeah. Understanding that, I think what I would want to add is that it's a process. That's what took time for me to understand. There's no black and white. It does not happen in a day. It's a process. It's a journey, like you're saying. And
some things happen very quickly.
Yeah.
Some things happen instantly. Some things take longer. Some things take even longer. But once you put in the practices into place, you will start feeling the result. You will start feeling better. That's sign number one, that it's working. I'm feeling better. I feel more empowered when I say no and when I enforce my boundaries. I feel better that I didn't let someone take something from me that I didn't want to give. So you start feeling better, number one. Number two, you start getting better at it. Number three, you gain momentum. Number four, you start the exponential growth. So it's incremental and then exponential. There's no such thing as instant gratification. You've got to work for it and you've got to give it time to reprogram, because we have programming that's been, for me, it's been 54 years, right, of programming. If I wanted programming and I want it to happen overnight, it can happen overnight by me turning positive, immediately being very positive.
Yeah.
Question is, at the next hiccup or problem, how low do you fall and how long do you stay there? See, I don't like the word strong. I like the word resilient, because strong means that we need to be ready and we have an armor.
Yeah. I see the difference. Yes.
And we're a knight in shining armor. We have all the weapons, right? We deflect, it bounces off of us. Although there is a point where that will happen. And I heard a term called Teflon coating, and it can slide off us, but it does have to touch us. Right? We do need to recognize it. And so not letting it slide off, but recognizing that it's happening. What do I feel? How low did I go? And how long did it take me to come back up? So as a mind power coach, that's what gives us life power. Recognizing and actually using our thoughts to work for us by being honest, by being uncomfortable, by practicing, and then by learning and keep repeating. The repetition is what will make us stronger. But the resilience is, I want people to feel it. That's what makes us human.
Yeah.
If I don't feel it, there is more danger.
You're right. Yeah. So the resilience is doing it over and over again and keep on doing it and staying there and not going back to that circle of the loop again.
Resilience is having the ability to rise beyond, to rise above, to utilize your tools and not dismiss yourself in the process. See, when we reframe, we're dismissing ourselves, and we're always complaining about other people dismissing us, but we do it to ourselves.
Yeah.
Reframing is important, but feeling is also important.
Yeah.
And there's just that piece. So resilience is having the ability to process emotions and to overcome situations, and then learning how to fly. So resilience is the wings that help us fly.
Yeah, you're right. Wow, this was really, really, I knew I was going to learn something, and I learned a lot.
Yeah, we're always learning. No matter how much we have grown and how much we've learned, there's always something that will give us a deeper, better, clearer picture idea and expression of what we're looking for. And as the Swiss cheese starts filling in, the hole starts filling in, I gained a better understanding of me and the resilience of solving the problems. And so that's what closes the holes in the.
Yeah. My cheese has lots of holes, big ones, small ones, all different sizes.
I love Swiss cheese, though. I do love Swiss cheese.
This was a really, really amazing conversation that we had today, Rabia. I didn't expect it to go where it went. I thought, talk about the challenges and how we did it all, but really, really empowering and a great learning.
I love how organically it happens and it was conversational. So I really appreciated that. And things come up in the moment, and that's the beauty of life as well. So what are your takeaways from today?
So my takeaway was that realizing that, separating ourselves from the belief. And when I said courage, I thought in my whole journey was that that's what I needed, the courage to stand up. But no, that's not what it was. It was knowing that I was part of that problem. That was the biggest learning for me, I think, today was that. And I have still been doing it for so many other different things with my relationships with my family and stuff, is where I am so much part of the problem because I am believing in it too. And so that was the biggest learning for me.
Excellent. And I was thinking that, just based on what we shared, was that we've got to get honest and really understand that, like you said, that we are part of the problem, and then not be limited by that and make a decision that I can do something different. And number 3 is be responsible for yourself so that the actions you take align to the direction you want to go, not towards the problem that you are moving away from.
Yeah. And also another one was being uncomfortable. It's so hard to go there, but we have to do it. Being uncomfortable is okay, because you have to do it.
Right. And that comes back to one more thing that I picked up is not to dismiss yourself, to keep yourself in the equation of your life.
Yeah.
Keep yourself. And I know I have some resources out there, which I will add to our portfolio on our website and on our Instagram, so people can download some quick tips and resources so that they can have immediate access to making and taking that first step forward.
Yes, we definitely will. This was really, really important conversation we had today. It's going to help a good amount of people. Yeah,
and we want to hear from you. If it's helping you, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us by email at contact@the rabiaandsanashow.com. Sana and I have a mission to empower people so that they can live their best lives, to make difficult conversations easier, to take those courageous steps faster. If we can support you in some small way along your life journey, we would be honored and privileged. And so, Sana, brings us to that time of our podcast.
Yes, it's my favorite time.
We are two Desi girls
reinventing cultural norms
with love. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Please rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow The Rabia and Sana Show on social medias.
Remember, you can watch the video version on YouTube, and don't forget to share, like, and subscribe.
If you want life coaching services, or you are reinventing cultural norms for yourself and think you would be a great guest and want to be on our show, please email contact@therabiaandsanashow.com.
And be sure to check out our next episode. See you next time.
See you next time.